You may have seen this effect where the talent is performing an action and all of a sudden it looks like they have a blue, red, and green version of them doing it as well. Well, that effect is known as the RGB split effect. We're going to perform this using the Time Warp RGB filter from Genarts Sapphire version 6 and the Find Edges filter. I have a clip on track 1 of a breakdancer. This would be an ideal clip to apply this effect on. Let's select our clip in track 1. Let's go to the effects browser. And let's type in Time Warp. Select the Time Warp RGB filter and double click it to apply it to our clip. Go to the effects control panel. Let's move a second from the endpoint of our clip. Set keyframes for the red shift frames and blue shift frames with a value of 0. Advance 15 frames. Change the red frames to 5 and the blue frames to -5. Advance 10 more frames and change the red to 10 and the blue to -10. Advance 10 more frames and change the red to 15 and the blue to -15. Move the playhead about a second in and set keyframes for red and blue at their current values. Advance 10 more frames and Option-Alt drag the keyframes to have the value of 10 and -10 to the playhead's position. Advance 10 more frames and Option drag the keyframes to have the value of 5 and -5. Finally, go 17 frames forward and change the values back to 0. If we scrub our playhead, we'll see that our clip has a misalignment of the red, green, and blue channels, creating the RGB split effect. Highlight the keyframes for when the Time Warp filter is on. We're going to right-click on one of the keyframes and change it to Bezier. Next, let's add a Find Edges filter to spice it up. Go to your effects browser, type in Find Edges. Highlight the filter and double-click it to apply it to our clip. Let's go to the effects control panel. Let's go to the first keyframe of our animation. Click on the invert checkbox to enable it to black. Set a keyframe at the playhead's current position and change it to 100. Go to the first RGB keyframe when it's on. Change the value for blend with original to 0. Go to the second to last keyframe of the red and blue shift keyframes. Set a keyframe for blend with original at its current value. Finally, go to our last red and blue shift keyframes. Change the value back to 100. Highlight the Find Edges keyframes for when it's actually on. Right-click and select Bezier. Let's go to our timeline. Let's mark an in and out by pressing the custom hotkey Shift/. I'm going to render this so I can see what it looks like in real time. I'll be back with you guys in just a second. Let's see our final result. What we have here is a nice inverted misalignment animation for our footage. You could download a trial of the Sapphire suite and try this out for yourself. DigiEffects Delirium and Boris FX's Continuum Complete 8 also have plugins that let you manipulate the RGB channels and pull off this effect. Out of the 3 brands, I found Sapphire the easiest to work with, but you have more parameter options if you go the DigiEffects or Boris Effects route. So try out plugins from all 3 brands and figure out what works for you. Let's move on to our next effect, Instant Replay version 2. You may remember this effect from Music Video Effects Volume 3, where I showed you how to do a WWE replay animation using a frame and 2 clips. One thing I forgot to add though was a slight flash transition before it goes to the dual screens. So this time, I'll show you how to do the animation again in Premiere Pro, and I'll show you how to do the flash transition. I have 2 clips in my timeline, one on track 3 and one on track 4, and beneath it, I have a text layer as well as a color mat for background and other treatments, which I'll show you guys later. I also have a frame for my Digital Juice collection that's a PNG so that it has embedded transparency. I'm going to place the frame on track 5 so that it's on top of the clip on track 4. Let's select our clip on track 4. Let's bring the scale down to about 78%. Let's highlight our clip and our frame and nest them by pressing the custom hotkey, Option C. Select your nested sequence. Press Ctrl N to rename. Let's rename this Top IR Screen and hit OK. Let's enable our video tracks by pressing the custom hotkey F8. I'm going to press Shift T to reveal our sequence. Select the footage in your timeline. Let's go to the Effects browser and let's type in Solid Composite. Highlight the Solid Composite filter and double-click it to apply it to our clip. Let's go to our Effects Control panel. With your playhead at the very beginning of your clip, let's move 10 frames forward. Let's add a keyframe for the Solid Composite's opacity. Let's bring the value down to 0. Let's move the playhead another 10 frames and change the value to 46. Move the playhead another 10 frames and change the value back to 0. Let's change the blending mode to add. Let's move our playhead to the keyframe where it's at 46% to see what we have. So far, we got our flash frame intro. Now let's find a point where we can have an outro. Let's go to our last keyframe. Highlight your 3 keyframes that you created previously. Move the playhead about 2 seconds forward in the timeline. Option drag the keyframes to the playhead's current position, like so. Since we did that, we don't have to recreate the same keyframes as we did before. Before you close this sequence, let's add markers at the point where the Solid Composite's opacity is at 46%, like so. Now, you can close your nested sequence. Let's move the top IR screen 1 track up. Let's disable it temporarily. Let's go back to our project browser. And let's drag our frame on top of our clip on track 3. Let's select our clip on track 3. Bring the scale down to about 78%. Let's highlight our clip and our frame and nest sequences once again. We'll select it and rename it Bottom IR Screen and hit OK. Let's re-enable our top IR screen. With your top IR and bottom IR screens selected, let's go to our effects browser. Let's type in Basic 3D. Highlight the filter and double-click it to apply to both of our sequences. Select the top IR screen and go to the Effects Control panel. Let's scroll down the motion parameter. Let's change the scale to 138. Let's move the playhead about 16 frames forward. Set a keyframe for the following: position, scale, swivel, and distance to image. Move the playhead about 13 frames forward. Change the scale to 112. Position it in the upper left-hand corner. Change the swivel to -15. And finally, change the distance to image to 90. Move the playhead 2 seconds down the timeline. Select the second keyframes we just created for all our keyframe parameters. Option drag them to the playhead's current position. Move the playhead about 13 frames forward. Highlight our very first keyframes and drag them to the playhead's current position. We now have our animation for our top IR screen. Let's angle and position the bottom IR screen so that it meshes well with our animation. For the bottom IR screen, let's bring the scale down to 65. Position the clip so that the upper left corner of the frame is underneath the top IR screen. Change the swivel to 8. The only thing left to do is add some text and a nice background to it. For the background, I had this color matte with some core melt complete filters on it. I applied the 3D ventilator shaft generator and I made sure that it stopped moving and angled it in 3D space. After I did that, I applied a 4-color gradient at its default values. You can use any background you find suitable. This was just something I did on the fly. The last thing you could do is add some text indicating this is an instant replay, although our two clips are completely different. I have a text layer that I created previously from the preview that you saw. I'm going to double click to open it in the title tool. What I did is I positioned my text layers, one on the upper right hand corner and one at the lower left hand corner. I made sure my text was bold, I added a red drop shadow, and then I added some other slight text treatments to taste. You can use whatever font you find suitable. This was just my own personal preference. Let's move our top IR screen down to track 4 again. If we set an in and out point around our clip, we could render this and see what it really looks like in real time. I'm going to render this real quickly, and I'll be back with you guys in just a few. Let's see what our final result looks like. A simple instant replay animation in Premiere Pro. This time, it has all the elements, the frame, the flash frame transition, and some nice text. Try this in your next sports video or miscellaneous video project and take it one step further. Bohr's Continuum Complete has a group of perspective filters called Z-Space 1 through 3 and DVE and DVE Basic, which allow you to position, scale, rotate, and more in 3D space using multiple planes or single plane to achieve this result. Download a trial of this suite and try these effects out for yourself. Let's move on to our next effect, passing extruded text. You may remember a variation of this effect when we did it in Volume 3, where I placed multiple videos inside of separate text layers. For this effect, however, let's make the text pass through our video as it moves, only revealing a portion of it. Let's open the title tool and create some text. Let's name our text layer Passing Text 1. I'm going to turn off my show background video. Next, I'm going to type a line of text. For this example, I'm going to type in NLE in caps letters using the Arial black font. You can type whatever you want so you can follow along. Once you type that, let's center it and move it towards the top. I'm going to exit the title tool and duplicate this text in the project browser by hitting Option D. Let's rename this duplicate Passing Text 2. Let's double click to open our duplicate in the title tool. Change the text to something else to taste. For this example, I'll type in Ninja. After you finish typing your new word, let's move it to the bottom of our screen. Exit the title tool. Next thing we have to do is duplicate both these titles and extrude the edges. Let's select both of our titles and duplicate them. At the end of each duplicate, add an EXT to indicate that they'll be extruded. Let's double click the first passing text to bring up the title tool. With your word highlighted, click on Add Inner Strokes. For the fill type, leave it at solid and change the color to taste. Click on Add Outer Strokes. Change the type to depth and the size to 45 and the angle to 100. Also, for our overall font, let's change the fill type to Ghost. For the fill type of our outer strokes, I chose a 4-color gradient, but you have the option of choosing something else. Before we exit the title tool, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, I'm going to show you how to save this title style into your own library. Let's click on the drop-down menu near the title styles. Select New Style. Name it to taste. Now, we can exit our title tool, and when we go to our second extruded text layer, all we have to do is throw on that layer style and we'll be fine. Let's exit it now. And here's what I mean. Since we applied this layer style to our second extruded text layer, all we have to do now is just exit the title tool and begin animating. Alright, so far we've created our text layers. Now, we need to start animating them so we can create a mat for our clip and apply the extruded edges so our clip only applies within those letters. So I have a clip on my timeline that's about 5 seconds long. I'm going to place the passing text 1 and 2 on top of it. Next, I'll select the out points of both of them and trim them to the length of our clip. I'm going to highlight both these passing text layers and nest them by pressing Option C. Let's select it and rename it Text Mat. Let's open our nested sequence to reveal it. Now, it's time to add some position keyframes at the beginning and end of each title. For the first passing text, I'm going to set a keyframe at the beginning and move it off screen to the left. I'm going to press Shift-O to go to the out point of my clip. Now, I'll move the title off screen to the right. Let's repeat this process for the second passing text, but instead reverse directions. Have it moving off screen from the right, then off screen to the left, like so. Now, if we scrub our playhead, this is what our animation looks like so far. Let's go back to our main sequence. Let's select our clip on track 2. Let's go to the effects browser, and let's type in track matte. Let's highlight the track matte key. Let's double click it to apply it to our clip. Let's change our matte from none to track 3. Now, if we scrub our playhead, this is what we have so far. The next thing we have to do is place our extruded text layers on top of this and make sure the animation matches. So let's go to our project browser. Let's bring in passing text extruded layer on track 4. And bring passing text extruded layer 2 on track 5. Let's trim the out point of both to match the length of our clip. Next thing we need to do is go back to our text matte. Let's right click on our passing text 1 and select copy. Let's go back to our main sequence and let's select paste attributes. Let's do the same thing for passing text extruded 2. Let's go to our nested sequence. Let's select passing text 2. Let's copy by pressing Command C. And then I'm going to right click and paste attributes. So if I scrub forward, this is what it looks like so far. So now, our passing text extruded layers has the same motion as their counterparts. The only thing left to do to all this now is to add a nice background behind it. I'm going to enable the red matte I have in track 1 for my custom background. With this custom background, I'm using third-party plugins from Genarts Sapphire as well as DigiEffects Delirium to accomplish this look, but you can insert any motion graphics background you want. Let's set an in and out point for the range of our animation so we can see this in real time. I'm going to render this and be back with you guys in just a second. Let's see what our final result looks like. There you go, a nice extruded text animation happening across our clips. Try this out in your next video and see how it works for you. Obviously, you could take this one step further by adding a drop shadow or any other crazy effects you could think of. Well, this is the end of part 2 of Music Video Effects Volume 4. I'll see you guys in part 3, where our next effects are the 3D pieces transition, the quarter block revealer, and set matte and gradient compositing. Before I end this part, I'd like to give a quick shout out to one of my subscribers, Mike Hickey, who's also known as TV Production Guy on YouTube. Mike provides beginner tutorials for users who are learning Final Cut Pro 7 and need help with the basics. The next shout out I'd like to give out to is to Art of the Guillotine. Art of the Guillotine is a community website run by Gordon Burkle, which provides articles of the latest news, techniques, and more in the production and post-production world. My last shout out for this part is to Splicefine.com. Splicefine is run by my good friend, Eric Weiss. It provides links and resources to help you become a more creative and efficient post-production professional. I've picked up a plethora of tips visiting the site and hanging out with the author at NAB in Vegas earlier this year. So check it out and learn something.